Welcome to Ron's Workbench. Hi, welcome back to Ron's Workbench. In this episode, we'll pick up with building the Casey's Workshop utility shed that we started building in episode 3. In my last episode, I went over the process I used to make painted signs and the technique that I used to attach one to the side of this building. After I finished painting the building white, I then went over the entire building with an India ink and alcohol wash to produce a worn look. One tip I want to stress is to always use a photo as a guide when you're painting anything. I used this picture that I took of a local building and used this as the inspiration for the look that I was going for. Once I completed the walls, the last part to paint was the rolling door for the entrance to the shed. The door that is included in the kit is a peel and stick laser cut. I dry brushed the door with a little bit of light gray acrylic paint that I added a drop of alcohol mixture to. I then highlighted the door rollers and the door handle with brown oxide. Next, I constructed a track for the door using a thin strip of styrene and painted it silver. I then went over the silver with the color that I used on the door and streaked it with brown oxide to give it a rusted appearance. At this point, I thought the building could use a couple more metal signs to go along with the larger painted sign. I found 2 signs that I thought would work on the internet, and I printed them out on glossy photo paper at the highest quality photo setting on the printer. I then mounted the photos onto a thin sheet of styrene, and when cut out, it gave them a 3D appearance. I mounted the larger of the 2 signs next to the door, and the second sign, which is a picture of a metal thermometer, to the short wall of the building. You know, every old building needs an old thermometer hanging on it somewhere. So, with all that done, it was time to start assembling the model. This is where the bracing that I did at the very beginning comes into play. By placing the bracing as I did, framing out the end walls, and then just the tops and bottoms of the long walls, it creates an interlocking frame that makes the assembly much easier and adds to the structure's stability. So here are a few pictures of how the building came together. So next, to make the butt joint between the 2 back walls, I sanded the first board and batten off of the inside wall, trimmed out the back wall, and then sanded the bracing to back so I'd be able to make a clean butt joint between the 2 back walls. Here what I did is I'm just taking off a little bit at a time to make that butt joint so we can have a nice, move the camera there, even joint across the back. So we're just taking a little bit at a time, taking our time, measuring each one carefully. There we go. And then once we have that right where we want it, we'll glue it up. Now, if you remember when I started this build, I said I made a mistake that experienced builders should pick up on. And now, that mistake comes to bite me right in the... The mistake I made was not gluing in the end trim pieces at first. So now what happened was my building ended up being undersized for the included flooring. Lesson learned. So, after I dried my tears, I installed the end trim pieces, painted them white, and then feathered the paint in using some very fine sandpaper. I then went over the building again with a very light black wash to complete the weathering. So let's move on to the roof. The kit comes with black construction paper to use as rolled tar paper roofing material. I cut the paper into 3/8 inch strips. This is around 4 scale feet and roughly approximately the standard width of rolls of tar paper that you can find in real life. Using a tip I picked up from Jason Jensen, before I cut the strips, I sprayed a light coating of black over the paper first and then used fine sandpaper and distressed the strips after I cut them by running the sandpaper vertically down the strips. I used a random pattern on all the strips, varying the amount of distress to each of them. Next, I glued down the strips using white glue, only putting down enough glue to do about 2 strips at a time. I cut the strips in the random length as I glued them in place. After the glue had dried and the paper was securely in place, I then used the sandpaper again and beat the roof up some more by dragging the sandpaper down the roof sections. Now it was time to glue the roof in place. I purposely did not put a ridge beam in place in between the end walls, nor did I use any joists. I wanted the roof to sag and to look as it was about to cave in. I had to get a little creative to hold the roof in place while the glue dried. Well, there's only a few things left to do with the building, and I think I'll leave those for the next episode. Thanks for joining me here at Ron's Workbench. If you like what you see here, give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And feel free to share this video with your friends. We'll see you next week on Ron's Workbench. On the next episode of Ron's Workbench, we'll finish up the coal office and discuss the takeaways from this build on the next Ron's Workbench.